right, we're very excited now to move on to our keynote address. Professor Irshad Manji is the founder of Moral Courage College, which teaches people of all ages, including kids, to turn heated issues into healthy conversations and sustain teamwork. Irshad is also a New York Times bestselling author. Her latest book is Don't Label Me, an entertaining primer on how to disagree better. I had the pleasure of sharing the stage with Irshad earlier this year at Utah State University, and I'm pleased to welcome her today to talk more about her initiatives throughout the country. Please welcome Dr. Irshad Manji.
Good morning, everybody. Also, by the way, my first time in Nashville, so Governor and First Lady, thank you so much for having all of us here. I would like to begin with, to me, the most fascinating factoid about our fractured society. And here it is. We actually agree more than we think we do on issues that we are told are polarizing. There is a surprising amount of consensus on so-called controversial and divisive issues. What we're divided about, however, is each other. We don't trust each other. And because we don't trust each other, we don't engage each other in meaningful ways, which only continues then to feed the mistrust and distracts us from the very issues that we could be making progress on if we did engage meaningfully. David French, just before me coming to the stage, had a discussion with you all in part about faith. A good friend of mine, politically committed friend of mine, asked me the other day, Irshad, you know about the golden rule? I said, sure, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. He said, no, not that golden rule, the new one. Do unto others before they do unto you. That's where we're at. And I am passionate about equipping people around the world, and that includes kids, with the skills to engage meaningfully, especially with those with whom they disagree or disagree with them. But it's not just about skills, folks. It's about habits. You see, in times of high emotion, which is really what we're talking about, we humans lunge for the lowest hanging fruit in order to cope with the stress. That means we reach for our habits. And so both the challenge and the opportunity now is to turn those skills into habits, and in so doing, to make ourselves worthy of the other's trust. You know that habits start early, right? If they're gonna stick through thick and thin, they've gotta start early. Which is why, at Moral Courage College, kids are part of our audience. You can see here that we're coming out with a children's book about a blind dog who shows that she is so much more than blind and the baggage that goes with that label. In fact, in this story, she manages to work with kids to both solve a mystery and save their friendship. And she does it with one core message: be curious before deciding to be furious. You see to the right here, we're also developing mobile games that incent or motivate teenagers to practice the skills of moral courage. Why? Because again, you can walk away from a fabulous workshop and your brain will tell you, you're good. Now that you know what you're capable of, it's all good. Just go back to what you were doing. No. all you have is knowledge, but knowledge is not the same as action. We all know this from sports. You can know the rules of any game, but you can't play it impactfully unless you practice, practice, practice. And there's one other thing that we're doing with young people. We're teaching them how to become mentors of moral courage skills to their own peers. Over breakfast, First Lady Abby Cox told a story about an activist in Utah who managed to elicit a sincere hug from someone who only minutes earlier thought he hated that activist. I want to tell you, First Lady, that activist is certified as a moral courage mentor. And I'm so happy to hear that these skills he has practiced long enough to actually have impact in the real world. Kids need validation that what we're asking them to do is part of what popular culture can reflect. Otherwise, all they'll be is misfits. Nobody wants to be a misfit. So, of course, we invoke pop culture, whether it's Ted Lasso or whether it's the martial arts icon Bruce Lee. I'll tell you in a second what Bruce Lee has to do with any of this. But in between, you see the photo of two people whom you will have never heard of until this morning. On the right is Genesis. On the left is Lewis. They're both Mississippians. Genesis is a hip-hop artist, and she opposes the Confederate battle emblem in the Mississippi state flag. Of course she would, because, by the way, her grandfather was murdered by the KKK. So for her, history is not abstract, it's deeply personal. Lewis, on the other hand, supports keeping the Mississippi state flag as inclusive of the Confederate battle emblem. And by the way, for him, history is not theoretical. He is the descendant of people who fought on the side of the South and is a proud member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. One evening, Genesis launches an anti-Confederate flag protest from a concert stage. And of course, cameras capture her protest, and of course, it goes viral, and of course, hate mail starts flooding her social media feeds. And not, of course, Genesis realizes, you know what? This is not going to solve anything. So I've got to do something more than protest. I've got to understand where the other side is coming from. And so, out of pure curiosity, Genesis reaches out to Lewis, who appeared in her social media feeds, and he said, Genesis, I don't want you to die. That's a good start. But I profoundly disagree with you on this issue. And so she invites him to her backyard. Why would he agree, especially with cameras there? As he told me, it's not that I trusted Genesis, it's that I wanted to be heard. I'm going to show you a 3-minute clip from their first conversation. And what I want you to understand is that Lewis actually doesn't change his mind about the flag. What he changes his mind about is Genesis. And as a result, he's ready to think more about what she has shared with him, because she has gone first in the listening department. We're about to roll the video, and I'm going to invite you all to pay close attention to how Genesis begins the conversation with Lewis. First, we'll see her talking about why social media is just not where it's at if we're going to have healthy conversations. Then we'll get into the conversation between her and Lewis. Let's roll.
Engaging online and comments and messages, that's cool, you know, but there's nothing like looking somebody in the eyes and seeing the subtle nuances for them to be able to relate to you and for you to relate to them.
The Confederate battle flag, and I had family members who fought for the Confederacy. It was designed as a flag to differentiate troops on the battlefield.
So when you see the state flag, Mississippi state flag, how does it make you feel?
It's definitely a symbol of, home. What about you?
Makes me feel unwelcome. With my grandfather and my family being harassed by KKK and white supremacists flying and waving that flag, there's a negative connotation when I think of that, and it's not something that I say represents me as a descendant of African Americans.
I see where people are offended by it, but I believe that we should just leave it be because it is history. It does show where we come from. We just need to educate the people as to what that flag is, what it really stands for.
To disrespect your ancestors is not my intent.
No.
At all. Just like I know you don't want to disrespect mine. But at the same time, I don't apologize for my protest because I do understand that. Yeah, I do understand that many Confederate descendants do harbor that ideology of white supremacy and don't acknowledge the faults that came with the history. You know, Confederate veterans were the ones who birthed the KKK. What was your reaction when I did my protest?
At first I was kind of upset, and then I start to think about it from your point of view, and that flag has brought me no harm, no hatred towards me. You know, as much as I would like to have it remain, who's to say that my wishes should outweigh the wishes of another? Will I lose my heritage if that flag's changed? No, it won't. We always talk about, if something bothers you, do something about it. Not a lot of people do, and here you are. So I went from upset to understanding to respect. And I support your decision in wanting to change the flag.
To hear Lewis say that he believes in me, even though he disagrees with some of the things that I say, that's beautiful. When there's absolutely no trust, it's very hard to have conversations that don't get heated or get violent or abusive and abrasive. If you're unwilling to even listen to someone's point of view or try to empathize of when they're coming from, you're not really adding anything to the table. My name is Genesis B, and I am Moral Courage.
I share this clip because it is a favorite of middle and high school students whom we bring the documentary to. They love it because it meets them where they're at, and because it shows, rather than merely tells, that these skills are possible, and that it's not about merely being nice or even merely being civil. It's about motivating your other to hear you out because you have gone first in hearing them out. So it's a toolkit. And for anybody here who is interested, I've got a handout to give you after this presentation that lays out the 5 core skills of moral courage and gives context for each. please share it with the young people in your lives, because again, it'll make them much more effective communicators of what they believe. And what they'll learn ultimately is that communication isn't just what we do with our mouths, it's what we do with our ears as well. I said that I would end with Bruce Lee. This may be the first time in NGA history that Bruce Lee has shown up. It should not be the last time, because his signal teaching to his own students was, be like water, my friend. And what he meant was, water always gets to where it needs to go, but not merely by crashing up against the rocks. You see what happens when all you have in your toolkit is confrontation. You get blowback. Instead, water washes over, it glides around, and it seeps through the obstacles in its midst, because it doesn't treat them like obstacles. Water treats the rocks in its midst as just part of the landscape. They have as much right to be there as water has. And that's exactly what Bruce Lee taught the very students who would be going up against each other. He said, the more rigid you are, the more predictable and fragile you will be. Instead, be agile, not fragile. And you can understand why an icon like Bruce Lee would be very cool to learn from for middle and high school students, and by the way, not just boys, girls as well, it turns out. I'll finish up this way. I mentioned that our organization certifies people to become mentors of these skills in their own environments, be they churches, be they workplaces, be they sports teams. Last year, we piloted an experiment to certify our very first teen moral courage mentor. And what she is now doing is going to the student clubs in her school and saying to them, if you actually want to be heard by people who don't yet agree with you, let me teach you how. I can't promise you that they'll agree, but I can teach you how to get a fair hearing. And what student club doesn't want a bigger audience? So if any of you think that that is something that could take off in either your school or in the school of people whom you know, please do get in touch. Because at the end of the day, this is not about being either or. Moral courage is about being both and. Standing your ground, if you fundamentally believe that what you have is the truth, stand your ground by all means, and create common ground at the same time. Sounds like a contradiction, but it's not. Standing your ground is about what you value. Creating common ground is about how you express what you value. So if you can leave your so-called other feeling respected, not agreed with, but respected, you've just motivated them to give you the hearing that you have offered first. Thanks so much for your time, and I look forward to engaging meaningfully more of you throughout the day.